1683. Europe is an absolute powder keg, and the fuse is lit.
One battle changed Europe forever.
If you love historical deep dives and uncovering forgotten turning points, consider subscribing. It really helps the channel out. All right, let's jump straight into this explainer and see exactly how a single apocalyptic clash of empires completely rewired human civilization.
Part 1. An Empire Marches.
So, picture the late 17th century. The Ottoman Empire isn't just big, it's a terrifying, unstoppable superpower. Under Sultan Mehmed IV, they are gearing up to push deep into Europe. The guy chosen to lead this massive campaign, Grand Vizier Kara Mustafa Pasha. He's brilliant, sure, but he is also ruthlessly ambitious. He mobilizes a breathtaking war machine. We're talking roughly 170,000 troops right out of the gate. And just look at the sheer scale of this mismatch. Waiting for them, completely isolated in the city of Vienna, is a garrison of maybe 15,000 professional soldiers, backed up by about 8,700 civilian volunteers. I mean, on paper, this wasn't even going to be a battle. It was a foregone conclusion.
And you know, this insane numbers game perfectly captures the mindsets of the leaders at that exact moment. On one side, you've got Grand Vizier Kara Mustafa Pasha marching forward with absolute, unshakable confidence. He wants territory, and he wants it now. On the other side, the Holy Roman Emperor, Leopold I. Actually, as this massive Ottoman army gets closer, Leopold and his entire royal court literally pack up and flee Vienna. They run to the safety of Passau, leaving the defense of the capital entirely on the shoulders of Count Ernst Rudiger von Starhemberg.
But you might be wondering, why Vienna? Why did both sides know that this specific city was going to dictate the future of history? Well, it all comes down to logistics. Vienna was the ultimate gateway to Central Europe. It controlled the vital traffic of the Danube River and the major overland trade routes pointing straight into the heart of Germany. If the Ottomans kick those doors down and take Vienna, the rest of Europe is basically left wide open.
Part 2. The Siege of Vienna. Fast forward to July 14, 1683. The Ottoman vanguard reaches the city walls, and a claustrophobic, terrifying nightmare officially begins for the trapped defenders. What follows is a brutal masterclass in 17th century siege warfare. First, the Viennese garrison takes the extreme, desperate measure of literally demolishing their own surrounding suburbs just to deny the Ottomans any cover. In response, the Ottomans start digging massive, complex networks of trenches so they can safely move their troops right up to the defenses. Then, it gets worse. 5,000 expert Ottoman sappers begin tunneling deep beneath the city walls, packing underground caverns with massive amounts of black powder to just blow the defenses wide open. But look at how the defenders counter this. They drive massive, raw tree trunks deep into the earth to reinforce their rotting wooden palisades. It sounds primitive, but that makeshift defense actually delayed the Ottoman bombs by 3 crucial weeks.
Inside the city walls, though, the clock is absolutely ticking down to zero. The physical and psychological toll on the people of Vienna is just horrific. We're talking severe starvation and rampant disease tearing through the population. The exhaustion is so complete, so absolute, that Count Starhemberg issues an order. Any guard found sleeping on watch is to be shot on sight, no exceptions. And then, morale completely bottoms out when news arrives of the Bertoldsdorf massacre. It was a nearby town that had surrendered, only to have its men slaughtered and its women and children dragged away into slavery. So for Vienna, surrender was literally not an option.
So, with the city walls literally crumbling from those underground explosions and starvation absolutely crippling the garrison, we really have to ask, how could a politically and religiously divided Europe possibly pull it together and unite in time to save them? Part 3. Forging the Holy League.
The answer is a frantic, monumental diplomatic scramble happening far outside those siege lines. Pope Innocent XI and Emperor Leopold I are basically working a miracle here. They managed to assemble a massive relief army of over 70,000 troops. And to pull this off, they had to somehow overcome deep, bitter historical rivalries and endless arguments over who was actually going to pay the soldiers. But they do it, finally uniting Austrian and German forces. The absolute linchpin of this entire coalition, though, is an alliance with the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. They bring in King John III Sobieski of Poland. He's a highly experienced, battle-tested commander, and he is immediately handed supreme command of this entire rescue force.
Part 4. The Winged Hussars arrive. Okay, so now we reach September 12, 1683. The Holy League forces have secretly marched through the dense Vienna woods and are now looking right down at the massive Ottoman camps from the Kahlenberg Heights. Let's walk through the ticking clock chronology of the battle itself, because it is intense. At 4 a.m.,
the Ottomans launch a fierce preemptive strike, trying desperately to catch the Holy League before they can fully deploy their lines. But by midday, the German Imperial infantry pushes back hard. They take these key fortified villages on the left flank. Then, around 4 p.m., the Polish infantry clears out the village of Gersthof, setting up a critical staging ground. The Ottoman lines are now stretched to their absolute breaking point. They're trying to fight off this massive relief army on one side while still holding down the desperate Viennese garrison on the other. And then, at 6 p.m., the tide just completely turns.
18,000. Just take a second to let that number really sink in. At 6 p.m., King Sobieski unleashes a staggering 18,000 horsemen, just pouring down the hills, directly into the Ottoman lines. To this day, military historians recognize this as the largest single cavalry charge in the history of human warfare. And leading the absolute tip of that spear were the legendary winged hussars. These guys were elite Polish heavy lancers, and they were visually terrifying. They wore these large wooden frames covered in eagle or ostrich feathers mounted right to their backs. Commanded personally by King Sobieski, they used devastating shock tactics. They smashed straight into the exhausted Ottoman ranks with unbelievable kinetic force. It triggered a total structural and psychological collapse of the entire besieging army.
It was incredible. The battle was effectively decided in a matter of hours. The remaining Ottoman forces totally shattered and fled the field. Surveying this breathtaking victory, King Sobieski sent a message back to the Pope. He offered a famous twist on the words of Julius Caesar, writing, "Venimus, vidimus, Deus vicet." We came, we saw, God conquered.
Part 5. The Legacy of 1683. So, the battle was over, but the fallout from this monumental clash of empires was really just beginning. The immediate aftermath was totally defined by the sheer scale of the loot left behind. The Holy League captured unheard-of treasures from the ruined Ottoman camps. We are talking priceless military flags, thousands of ornate tents, and massive herds of sheep, cattle, and camels. But, as you might guess, all this immense wealth instantly caused intense friction and jealousy. King Sobieski claimed the very first pick of the spoils, which deeply offended the allied German and Austrian commanders, fracturing that hard-won unity almost immediately.
For the Ottomans, though, the personal consequences of this massive failure were absolute. Grand Vizier Kara Mustafa Pasha managed to retreat to Belgrade, but he couldn't outrun the Sultan's anger. On December 25, 1683, acting on direct orders from the top, he was executed in the traditional Ottoman manner for high-ranking officials who failed, strangulation with a silk rope. This single day permanently rewired the geopolitical map of the world. For the Ottoman Empire, the defeat at Vienna marked the permanent halt of their expansion into Europe. It led directly to the loss of Hungary and sparked a centuries-long imperial decline. Conversely, for the Habsburg Empire, this victory was the ultimate catalyst. It secured their borders for good and launched their absolute dominance over Central Europe.
But here is where the story takes a truly fascinating turn. Could the echoes of this 17th century battle actually stretch all the way into the 21st century?
Consider this controversial but deeply compelling modern historical theory. Some historians and analysts propose that al-Qaeda deliberately chose the date of September 11 for their 2001 terrorist attacks as a dark, symbolic callback to September 11-12, 1683. You see, in certain radicalized circles, the Battle of Vienna is viewed as the exact moment the Western world gained dominance over Islam. 3 centuries later, that specific date was allegedly chosen to mark a horrific modern retaliation. It truly puts into perspective the massive invisible chains of cause and effect that shape our entire world. If one massive cavalry charge back in 1683 can alter centuries of borders, collapse massive empires, and still echo in the geopolitics of the modern day, what hidden turning point are we marching toward right now? Think about that.